So next we're going to have our keynote, which is What's Next for AI. So please welcome to the stage the Special Advisor to the Chancellor on Artificial Intelligence at the University of Illinois, Michael Bennett.
Good morning, everyone. Thanks so much for, first of all, granting me this coveted 8:30 a.m. speaking slot. I'm always happy to get started bright and early. Awesome gathering, incredible energy. So a round of applause for the council and for NAM. Special shout out to Dave and Steve and Brenna who've kept me on track for this presentation. It's really quite impressive. So again, thank you for having me. Hopefully this won't be too boring for any of you. So for the last 20 years or so, I've spent most of my working hours bouncing between academic, corporate, and public institutions, helping organizations and units within those organizations understand emerging technologies and figure out how to onboard them, implement them, and deal with their broader implications. When it comes to AI, this has been a central concern of mine now for about 10 years or so. So preceding the creation of OpenAI and all of the Gen AI hype and excitement, going back to about 2000. The implications of AI's adoption and broad dissemination across the planet, both in terms of systems and concepts, in some ways, I think, parallel some of the developments that we've seen with other emerging technologies. Those of you whose organizations are involved with material sciences probably see some common contours with all of the excitement around nanomaterials about 20 years ago. Hopefully, if you're out in the audience, as I expect you are, we'll get a chance to talk about that a little bit. But for our purposes today, some of the things that I'll say to you, I could have said 15 years ago, talking about that earlier phase of excitement and hype. I come across to some audiences like a classical kind of fool, in the sense that I say the types of things to big, broad audiences of leaders of major organizations like yours that are maybe a little uncommon. But this is a function of those parts of me that come from a background in physics, which is a very serious, if sometimes grandiose discipline, but ultimately one that's very much interested in foundational truths, a mix of that with law as well. Again, arguing about best senses or understandings of complex situations. And then, I'm a black guy from the Deep South as well, so I'm just argumentative by nature in some senses, right? And so these audiences that I just mentioned sometimes see me like this. Sometimes for the nerds in the audiences, it's more of a predictive and advisory function, right? The fool component is actually useful so that you don't wind up spending every day hearing the same story, the same kind of group thought. This is a really important function as far as I'm concerned in this kind of climate around AI, where the money, the hype, the geopolitical dimension, all of it is so intense. It's been so hyper pervasive, right? Omnipresent for a solid 2 years now. And so I think of my function as being, again, partly foolish in the Shakespearean sense, and then partly Bene Gesserit as well in the advisory sense. Hopefully that means something to the nerds in the audience. Speaking of hype, it's not all nebulous hype. This is a phenomena that is grounded in serious developments. Many of you probably have seen slides that express these developments comparable to what you're seeing here on the screen before, and so I won't linger very long. But here, what you're just seeing, in effect, is the rate of development of discrete types of AI over the last quarter century, effectively, right? And we see those lines becoming more and more extreme as we move from handwriting recognition out to language understanding. The drama of someone getting up and saying that AGI is right around the corner is perhaps not present in this slide, but a deeper, more fundamental sense, right, of what's happening in the space is, in my opinion. Despite the hype, there is real development here, right? These technologies are moving extremely quickly. When you look at the major players who have the money and the resources and the competitive pressure to force them to examine these types of emerging technologies much earlier than many others, you see another sign of just how important the technology is. And when I say the technology, I'm talking right now about Gen AI broadly construed. So when Diamond says, and now he's done this 2 years in a row, this was essentially cut and pasted from his 2023 letter, when he says that there are 300 use cases within his organization, right? This is Diamond, right? This is not someone who can afford to mess around, who can spend time kind of dilly-dallying and give something a couple of years before he sees ROI. When he says that there are 300 use cases in there, this means that probably for the last year and a half before this letter drops, he's had multiple units, A and B testing, various implementations, and it's probably whittled down twice as many use cases down to something that is more manageable and sustainable over the longer term. Longer term for his organization being probably 2 years or so, but still 300 use cases. This has led to a noticeable drop, to be clear and to be honest, again, in that foolish sense, a noticeable drop in the number of employees that are working at the lower levels of his organization as well, a drop of about 5% or so. But again, the larger point here is that the technology is serious and its uptake is non-trivial in major organizations that, again, have the resources to embrace it. Gen AI has a whole range of uses. We don't need to linger on this one too long. You've probably seen this. I hope that many of you are experimenting with Gen AI and have been for at least the last year or two. And actually, just by a show of hands, how many people, at least on a weekly basis, are using Gen AI in one form or another right now? Yeah. How many people on a daily basis? So I'd say that's about a third of you answering yes to that last question. Incredibly useful. I'm a chronic user, so it's daily for me, including on the weekends, it seems, at this point. I think that this is an extremely useful, and in many instances, kind of vital ritual, in effect. One, it helps with advisory work, but two, I think that I've been, to follow on what David was saying, I think I've been able to map out gains in efficiency in a range of things that I've been doing, including giving talks like this. My sense is that folks who spend more time individually at the management level and at the C-suite level, individually, effectively playing with the technology, have a more nuanced sense of its capacities. And so to those of you who didn't raise your hand, even for the first question, I recommend that you get on this very quickly, not just for your organization, but personally. Across various industries, the applications are fairly broad as well. We're getting a lot of good data from both corporations and from public entities about the ways that they have decided to at least stick a little toe or two into the space. You can see here that a broad range of them have done relatively modest things. This is not exactly science fiction, but it doesn't have to be science fiction in order for it to generate a competitive advantage for organizations. What's super interesting about Gen AI, as far as I'm concerned, perhaps the most interesting thing about it, is its deviation from what we would have called AI, say, 15 years ago. Right? If you go back to the mid-20th century, it's a summer of probably 1955, 56 or so, Dartmouth College, there's a workshop. This is where the term artificial intelligence is born. Right? The notion from there all the way up through roughly the mid-90s was that AI would be created by developing a set of rules right? Usually a very long list of rules, some of them relatively simple, that would then be embedded into a computer system to allow that system to effectively respond to almost any type of prompt that was presented to it, right? A rules-based system. Once we get to effectively the mid to late 90s and then certainly into the 2000s, folks like researchers at Google and other major tech companies completely changed course. In many senses, I think it's misleading to describe Gen AI as AI in the same way that we talked about AI, right, between the mid-1950s and the 1990s. It's so different. And it's not just that it's different, it's that it's also mystifying, even to many data scientists, right? Even to many data scientists. If you talk to the researchers at Google, they know that what they're doing is effective. More often than not, there's still hallucinations, but they can't really tell you how it actually works. Inside of organizations like that, these types of cartoons makes them both laugh, makes those researchers laugh, but it also makes them turn away. They're not making direct eye contact with you as well when you show a slide like this, because it's really getting at the truth. They know that somewhere in the mix of massive piles of data and many thousands of lines of code based on linear algebra, that something interesting is happening. They know that it's comparable in effect to something like what happens in your phone when you press the dictate button when you're sending a text. This is a foolish thing to do. I do it all the time. You should not do this. But when you press that button and you just speak in to create your text message, and that machine is kind of guessing about next words and taking words that I always wind up sending very vulgar messages unintentionally, right? Because I don't know where it's getting its insights from, but it's guessing ineffectively, inefficiently as far as I'm concerned. And they know that it's something in that realm. They understand the math, but they don't understand how we're actually getting these answers, right? If you sit with, and I know there are data scientists in the audience, and so I strongly encourage you to pump them full of some of the wonderful liquors that we have here, and just ask them to explain to you what's happening, right, behind the curtain of these types of systems. If they're honest, I bet they will say something that pretty much corresponds to this cartoon. So, given that qualifying set of statements here and qualifying image, right, you're probably getting a sense that I'm both a skeptic, certainly not a booster, but I'm super interested and committed to figuring out how organizations ought to implement the technology, right? Having discounted for the hype that, again, Dave was pointing to. And so what I usually do on an annual basis is kind of whittle down a lot of the hype into a discrete, usually a small number of discrete terms that I think are absolutely essential to understanding what's happening in the space over the next 12 months or so. At the front of this deck, there was a QRC that would give you some information on me, and at the very end of it, there'll be one that'll send you to an essay that I've written recently about some of this content, just in case you're interested. And as has been noted already, you'll also be able to get access to this presentation after the fact. So better to listen and get prepped for the Q&A than to write so much, perhaps. But the 5 key terms that I think are, again, absolutely essential for understanding the contours of what's probabilistically on tap for the next 12 to 18 months: transformer, agentic AI, local AI winters, data architectures, and responsible AI. The only term on this list that's remained constant over the last 2 years, as I've given this type of speech, is the last one, responsible AI, and I'll say a bit about why that is in a moment. So, transformer technology underpins generative AI. Most of us think about Gen AI as something like ChatGPT, maybe 4, I lose track of the iterations, but whatever the highest iteration is right now. And that's a fair instance of the technology, but transformer technology is much more profound than what you would take away from regular experience with ChatGPT. Undergirding many domains, reservoirs of data, if you will, understanding and knowledge, are patterns that are not perceptible to human beings, right? So transformer technology is able to discern those patterns and apply them in interesting ways. When ChatGPT gives you a response to a prompt that you've put in, it's using transformer technology to extract structural patterns from the data that is effectively all of the text on the internet. Right? Imagine that technology applied to any other type of data. Medical images, right? There's generative AI now that can take a massive pile of, say, images of lungs, right? Muscles, capillary structures, the brain. Say, take a couple million of those, and without any kind of identifying information related to race or gender, or ethnicity or age, with something above 96% accuracy, determine those factors just from the images. Just from the images. You might be able to find 6 doctors on this planet that can do something like that. They're, again, underlying patterns to these massive piles of data that are not perceptible by humans that transformer technology is able to discern and make use of. Agentic AI. ChatGPT seems amazing. It is amazing in many ways, but it's juvenile compared to agentic AI. Imagine instead of going to a system and putting in some kind of question-based prompt, going in instead and describing to the system what your goals are. Right? You want to hit certain targets over a certain time period. You want to figure out how to hit these targets with a particular set of financial constraints on you, or a particular set of personnel constraints on you. You want to position your organization so that you are able to be nimble based on, say, predictions that 2 or 3 probabilities are highly likely for developments in your market. Imagine going to the system with these types of questions, these types of goals, and saying to the system then, help me figure out how to achieve these goals. And the system as well, if it's a fully formed agentic AI system, not only will it be able to provide roughly at the same velocity that ChatGPT does, a proposal for how you should proceed, but with APIs and other forms of connective systems, hardware and software, that agentic AI system will be able to operationalize that once you give it the okay. So imagine the AI system being connected to robotic systems, to communication systems, to HR, to marketing, right? And setting it loose in that kind of way. Absolutely fascinating potentials, also quite frightening for C-suite and for board. David mentioned the possibility of AI winters. What I'm hearing and what I'm seeing when I talk to researchers and funders, say at Department of Defense and Energy and the National Science Foundation, and again, some of the larger tech companies, is that there's an even more particular concern with local AI winters. Generative AI, particularly in the form of things like ChatGPT, so popular, taking up so much energy and so much money and so much attention that other forms of AI we fear are starting to wither on the vine. We see research funding going predominantly to Gen AI, and again, something closer to the text-based form of ChatGPT, rather than going into forms of AI that have been with us for 30 and 40 years. Analytics, natural language processing, the broader space of machine learning, computer vision, right? The folks who are looking at the research needs of both universities and large corporations projected over the next 20 years are very much concerned about this. Local AI winters. Data architectures, right? This is something that Steve and I were talking about a bit yesterday. We have spent, many of us at least, in larger organizations that generate huge amounts of data. We spent the last 20 years or so, 25 years in many instances, being pretty messy about the way that data is stored, when it's stored at all, and a little lackadaisical as well about giving access to crucial forms of data, right, to the broader preponderance of our organizations. Data is often stored, siloed, held off somewhere. Considerable emphasis on security and cybersecurity in many instances, but not so much on sharing, right, and leveraging the value of the data, even discerning the value of the data. What we're seeing increasingly is that the data-hungry AI systems now are encouraging companies to figure out new ways to distribute the data, to provide access to data within an organization and between organizations. These three different modes are now starting to find their way into operationalization and specialized forms across different industries. I've spent a fair amount of time recently with, and this is kind of fascinating, kind of larger law firms, like global law firms that are thinking a lot about this, right? A lot about this. You think about the repetition that happens within a large law firm. You think about one that may have, say, 1,500 or 2,000 lawyers spread across maybe 30 different countries, the biggest law firms on the planet effectively, and the most powerful and the richest ones. They've had to shift over to think more about moving from those messier data lakes and moving to something like a data mesh, right, which is a much less centralized form of data storage and distribution and access permissions, and something like data fabric as well, which goes in the opposite direction, comparable to a data lake in the sense that there's oftentimes a singular reservoir, but the access privileges are much more nimble and dynamic over time. And then the data as well is it's significantly less messy. Responsible AI, and we'll talk about use cases and a few other things before we wrap up. I would usually spend half a talk talking about responsible AI because it is so crucial. The nature of your conference and what you're up to suggested to me that a single slide would make more sense here. But I still want to underline this notion because, again, this is a chronically present concept that essentially corrals all of the negative externalities, right? All of the bad things that we've seen happen already with AI systems, right? The models that are properly guardrailed, the ones that are operating within the bounds of not just law, as important as that is, but within the bounds of widely accepted ethical parameters. You'd be pretty surprised, I imagine at least, you'd be pretty surprised to find out how few corporations are actually abiding by these concepts. This is problematic for a range of reasons. We won't get into it again. We won't get into it in the body of this presentation and Q&A perhaps. But the broader kind of negative externalities of AI systems are pretty profound. I mean, you've heard about hallucinations. You've probably heard about what it actually takes to clean up data that's used to train these systems. Increasingly, we're hearing about the resource requirements of these systems as well. Everything from what it takes to actually produce the chips, the hundreds of thousands of chips that are required to create these systems, all the way over to the water that's required to cool the data centers. And then even more so, and this is becoming a fascinating element of news over the last 6 months or so, even more so the energy requirements and what it actually takes to power the data centers that are required to enable these technologies. I hesitate to say this in some audiences, but I'll say it here. I don't know why, but I'll trust you with this. I'm in a bet now. It's a $500 bet, and the notion is that within the next 5 years, the real payout, the real benefit of all of this excitement around AI, it probably won't even be AI. It'll probably be energy, right? When you look at what the larger companies are doing, data centers that come with their own power plants, some of them nuclear, the recommissioning of what we used to call 3 Mile Island, right? A 20-year exclusive energy contract, that's what Microsoft has signed on to. That the recommissioning has not even happened yet, in part because they don't know how to do it. No plant has ever been recommissioned in this country, right? When you're looking at those things, and you see as well that Gates, Altman, and others are in their side ventures, investing in fusion technology, right? The concentrated energy going into the energy question around AI. My bet is that we'll probably see something like a working fusion model within the next 5 years or so. And if not, I'll be out 500. So what about stepping out a little ways into the future? What about the next couple of decades, right? Taking us out to the mid-2040s. As we've heard, the 30s are right around the corner. So let's go just a little bit further. What are we talking about? These the use cases that I'll describe here kind of march out into the future. The first one is already happening. The second one will already be happening in another couple of years when you reconvene then in 2026, 27. And some folks are projecting that the third one is likely to be relatively commonplace by the time we get to 2030, early 2030s. Before I talk about the use cases, so I'll say something about big factors, right, that are perennial and what they mean against the backdrop of some of these projections. And then we'll close out by saying just a little bit about what it'll actually mean for the culture of organizations, right? The technologies are not plug and play. You can't just get this stuff and, turn it over to your tech people and, come in the next day and have it all working. Like, this will require significant cultural churn inside of even smaller operations in order for there to be meaningful ROI. So we'll talk a little bit about what that means. Again, I think these are 3 big factors that come up in every conversation that I have in advisory roles, every conversation that I have when I'm talking to researchers, both in corporate space and then in the academy. And also when I'm talking to organizations and individuals who specialize, as I do often in advisory work. Some of these notions are not they're not confined to your space. We're not just talking about manufacturing. They do apply to manufacturing, but not exclusively to manufacturing. And the first of these, design optimization, is a crucial example. It's agnostic. Agnostic is is the term that I use to describe this applicability to many industries and many sectors. Rapid turnover, rapid iteration. Oftentimes now we're seeing retailers use AI, Gen AI, to iterate over designs that they don't even intend to sell, right? They might go through 3, 4, 5, 6 generations, 3 years worth of designs, and add one to that and have that +1 be the design that they go with in their next cycle. this is something that would have been prohibitively expensive even 5 years ago. And now it's less expensive than actually working with a two-person design team for a couple of months. Right? The cost savings, once you've spent the money to actually bring the systems in, is significant. Imagine that kind of strategy applied across the board. We're seeing that already. For the more mature, and I don't mean that in any kind of necessarily disparaging sense, I just mean the entities and organizations that have embraced the technology and been working with it for, say, 3-4 years now, as opposed to 6 months or a year. For those more mature sectors and organizations, an augmented workforce as well. We're seeing increasingly that even junior employees, folks who have only been on for a year or two, are strongly encouraged to work very closely with an AI system, right? Onboarding, right? The answering of basic questions, right? That the types of things that prevent those employees from, again, kind of truth, but mature audience, so that prevents those employees from being actually productive for sometimes a year or two before, a year or two after, right? They've arrived. Those types of impediments to significant contribution to the organization's goals, we find that they are being overcome, not in some kind of dramatic fashion, but again, even modest gains, right? If the cost and time and energy and money that it takes to bring a new employee to productivity is reduced by even 5%, much less 10%, that's meaningful. The augmented workforce, right, notion here is getting at that. We're also seeing that Gen AI in particular is being used in pretty intense and ubiquitous ways when it comes to customer relations, when we're talking about project lifecycle monitoring and interventions there, as well as supply chain management, optimization. Sustainability is going to be, already is a huge space of concern, domain of concern, I would even say. And increasingly with AI, because of the energy requirements and the resource requirements more broadly and the huge investments, sustainability will almost certainly, I'm as sure of this as I am of almost anything, will almost certainly remain a key concern. We know that to the extent that sustainability is baked into manufacturing processes early, that savings can be significant in many instances, both in terms of the types of inputs that are required over time, the cost of actually dealing with the full life cycle of whatever it is you make, right? All of these things, to the extent that they can be anticipated and understood early on, are absolutely crucial. The design, sourcing, delivery, recycling. If you would have gone back to some of the kind of more outlandish thinking of, say, some of our friends in the Bay Area, no disrespect to people that are coming from San Francisco or Oakland, but I'm talking about that Wired club that was born in the early 90s or so. This was, many people thought of this as kind of hippie talk, right? But they were some of the first people after Buckminster Fuller talking about what a world might look like if we took recycling seriously from the very beginning of production, right? They were some of the first people talking about what it might actually mean to have a complete life cycle understood and baked into design from step zero. And we're now arriving at this kind of point. The notion that you could have elements that are essential to your production processes understood and accounted for throughout the entire life, and not just in a linear sense, but in a circular sense, right? So the entire life and rebirth of those elements in new products is becoming a reality, in part thanks to a lot of what's happening with Gen AI. And Steve and Dave and Brenna and I have been talking quite a bit over the last couple of weeks about digital threads. And effectively, I feel like this technology is the embodiment of that process that those hippie wired people were talking about. It enables this. Right? This is already happening. Compliance is, again, usually a topic that I spend an entire talk on. It's a huge, even before the election, a huge space of concern, a huge cost sink as well for many organizations, and a huge space of uncertainty increasingly post-election. In effect, a story within itself. Everyone in this room, I'm sure, would probably give at least a piece of one of their pinky fingers if we could have a national AI regulation regime in place tomorrow. But I've got bad news for you. It's not going to happen, right? It's not going to happen. There are many more reasons than what you see here for why, but these are the most important ones. And the punchline of this story warrants a bit of a sidebar here, so let me walk through very quickly. There's already a ton of legislation out there that applies to AI systems, right? Again, discounting for the hype, AI is not, it was not born yesterday. The problems that are related to it are not unique to it in many instances. And so one of the issues now is that there's some wise regulators out there who feel, I think correctly, that it's just not that big of a deal. It does not warrant new regulation. And so those people are pushing back against the developments. To put it mildly, we also live in a complex political legislative environment right now. Right? We'll see what happens with Doge. We'll see what happens when Musk and company go in there and start as major AI advocates, right? A co-founder of OpenAI. We'll see what they put in place at the federal level, but it's unlikely that we'll arrive at a state in this country such that our Congress is able to agree on significant legislation anytime soon. Super complicated there. They also don't know what they're doing. There are just not a lot of people there who understand data science. They hardly understand math, obviously, right? These are not people that are capable on their own internally of doing this. And so imagine with the 435 of them, maybe plus or minus one, depending on who winds up in jail within the next year and a half. Imagine them working with the special interests, each one of those special interests coming in with a proposal for how to proceed. It's just, right, it's an untenable situation, barring some kind of major intervention. It's also really difficult to write these laws, even when everyone is aligned. I spent about 2 years, a couple of years ago, working with the New York City Council, helping them develop a municipal level law focused on the application of AI in HR contexts. Very difficult, very difficult. Everyone was on board for the most part, pretty smart people as well, some very smart, and a whole host of experts who were impartial, right? Not partisans one way or another, just there to help answer questions and so forth. Figuring out how to contour the law so that applications that were realistic were actually covered, and other things that weren't really even connected to AI in any kind of meaningful sense were not covered, was extremely, extremely hard. The technology is moving very quickly. The application potentials within, again, just HR are so broad and dynamic and uncertain right now that it was very, it was a serious task, a Herculean one even. The law was finalized about 1.5 years ago, came into effect late last year, and no one likes it. There's also this myth that many legislators have, even those who are, the few of them who are, say, holding Ph.D.s or M.D.s, right? Folks who are technically and scientifically trained. Many of them just don't believe that law can keep up. They don't believe that the pace at which technological development occurs is amenable to regulation in any meaningful sense. And so they feel like it's a waste of time to try to do this. I think that this is a myth. There's not a whole lot of time for me to get into why right now, but perhaps in Q&A. This is a serious problem. The belief in this myth, I believe, is really quite problematic, not just for the age of AI, but for the implications of the emerging technologies that are on the horizon, their implications for society, for our nation in particular, I feel is quite perilous. We already touched on this first use case a bit, right? AI-enabled product design, right, is already happening, right? Cutting back on the costs of working with third-party vendors and consultants, accelerating the pace at which internal units that are responsible for the creation of new products, the pace at which they do their work. This is already happening. It's almost old news. This use case is pervasive throughout many domains, including a fair number of manufacturing spaces. One of the greatest examples of how this particular use case comes to bear fruit is that organizations that go down this route are able to learn from all previous designs, right, at incredible speeds, right? You don't have to sit around with someone who's been at the organization for 25 years and pull up the documents on it. You simply have the system absorb all of that data, right? Some organizations are even using Gen AI to look over all previous designs for a particular solution space to find out what types of designs might they have created in the past that weren't obvious then. And some of them are realizing that those potential earlier designs are still applicable and valuable in the present moment. It's a fascinating use of the technology. Agentic AI, we've talked about a bit already. The punchline here is that, right, many organizations now are moving away from situations in which the AI system is simply responding with text, but instead is responding with solutions to your problems in an more aggressive context, responding and saying, well, here's the solution. Do you want me to action it now? Right, agentic AI. And I'm wanting to give us a little bit of time for Q&A, so I'm just picking up the pace. Agentic AI, huge implications. I'm sure that blood pressure and heart rates have picked up just a little bit. I've always thought that it'd be useful to have kind of biosensors on audience members to gauge the impact of some of these notions. But imagine what this could actually mean in the broader sense. De facto human AI robotic teaming. Right, human experts not just sitting on top of a system, not just being the dominant factor, right, in decision making, but embedded in a horizontal fashion with systems, perhaps with some kind of brain-computer interface even. Right, not just pressing buttons, but just thinking. Right, these types of phenomena, 15 years ago, we would have been talking about a Neil Stephenson novel. I've seen this type of thing at work across several universities already. And DARPA is also super interested in this. Lastly, imagine an industrial metaverse in which all processes are represented virtually, right? All individuals, all units that are essential to your processes are represented in effect, a kind of matrix, like, and I mean the movie Matrix, speaking to the nerds once again, represented in a virtual environment to which you have direct access. Perhaps it's a model that you're able to look down upon. Perhaps it's a model in which you are embedded. Perhaps you are, as a CTO or a CDO or someone else in C-suite, perhaps you are continuously wearing some kind of augmented reality device that allows you to see not only what is immediately in front of you in a naturalistic sense, but the broader context of your organization in real time as it interacts with the broader environment. This is what we're talking about when it comes to the metaverse, industrial metaverse. Radically new approach. Radically new. There are probably not even 20 corporations on the planet right now that have stepped significantly into this space, but many of them are right on the cusp of it. These developments are not the types of things that are, again, that are plug and play, right? We're not talking about buy the technology, connect with a third-party vendor, and develop a strategy and press go, right? This is calling for even the first use case, if it's done in a robust sense, is calling for a radical transformation, right? Cultural transformation, really, fundamentally. And so matching Sutton's bitter lesson about what AI actually means after that I think it was 2017 Google paper described transformer technology, there's a closing bitter lesson here for CDOs and CTOs. It's going to be on you, right? You will have to socialize these concepts. You will have to socialize the development, the implementation, make the case for the value of these experiments, which will be expensive. Upside potential significant, though. This means convincing your boards and convincing your executives that it's worthwhile, explaining these rather crunchy topics in ways that are effectively understandable by normal humans. And it also means thinking significantly about what it means to bring employees along, too, right? Training, professional development, right? In many instances, the young people that are coming through universities that will be your employees in another 5 years are super excited about this. But they also understand, if they understand the technology, they also understand their value as employees. And so a part of this game will, again, be horizontal training and education, vertical socialization of the concepts, and then an intense focus on maintaining the investment that your employees actually make in your organizations. And with that, I will close. Hopefully, we'll be able to have a nice conversation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Michael. So, Michael, I do apologize, and I apologize to the audience because we do not have time for Q&A right now, but hopefully this morning you're going to stick around for a little while, and we'll be able to take questions during the break.
Definitely.
Excellent. Great job. Very insightful.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Oh, my God. You are wonderful. Thank you.